Hi, everybody, and welcome to my weekly cult situation report. I am Daniela, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. This week, we are going to be talking about Signal Gate, Kegsbreath, and DUI hires, Elon Musk's stock plummeting, and what it looks like when a cult leader is in their end stage. We are going to talk about how knitting cult lady isn't a psyop because human beings can't be psyops, but some of the things you should look for in conspiracy theorists. The term black and white thinking, the books that I'm reading right now, how we survive living through being in a cult that we can't get out of. I actually had a good conversation with someone in the cult of AA this week, so you're going to hear about that. We're going to hear about appearance control with Caroline Levitt looking a little wacky and Mike Johnson looking a little orange, and all kinds of other things, including the Moonies being banned from Japan. I wrote a book called Uncultured about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and then going into the cult of the US Army. You can get signed copies of that attached here or in my shop anytime you like if you are watching this on YouTube. Because we finally have signed books here now. Yay! All right, let's get started with Signalgate, Whiskey Leaks, or however you've been referring to the giant fiasco that happens. Let's talk about it. In case you're new, I am a former U.S. Army captain, intelligence officer, deployed to Afghanistan twice. Part of why I've spent my whole life studying the bad guys. And I was the one in charge of the military secrets for the battalion. If you wanted in the vault, the skiff, or just access to classified information in general, you had to go through me. I was also in charge of who had clearances. In fact, one time someone parked in my parking spot, and I may have left them a little note saying that the intelligence officer had revoked their clearance. There may have been a moment of panic there. Okay, what happened was bad, right? We all know that there was a chat about active war going on in Signal. It's illegal on so many levels, but to start with, it is both treason and espionage at a very, very, very high level. And my analogy for this is that these guys butt dialed their wives while they were cheating on them. But now they're trying to get mad at the cell phone company, and their wife's response, when really the problem was their bad actions in the first place. So, according to the Government Records Act, none of those people in those positions are allowed to delete any of their messages. So, having the conversation on Signal at all is illegal, makes it illegal, even if nothing classified had ever been discussed. But it very, very much was. And the only person who acted correctly there was the journalist with any kind of integrity. In any other administration, these people all would have woken up in jail. In fact, I believe they would have found out about what happened by people coming to haul them away. And the president would be resigning. I think this is very, very significant. I still think it might lead to a bunch of stuff, although it might not, which would be very crazy. But here's the thing. I think this is a brainwashing, cracking level event, especially for veterans or for anyone who's worked in the US government or had anything to do with secrets, because they know in their bones that if they had been involved in this, they would be going to jail for the rest of their life for treason. They know that. Even if they're explaining it to themselves right now, that's fine. And veterans and active duty are actually fairly bipartisanly agreed that this was bad. Whether they can right now understand that that means their cult leader is a bad guy too, they will. Cracks in the brainwashing sometimes take years to develop. But it's just one of those things that, like, you don't have to explain. They know. Every single person knows from the second they get anywhere near getting access to classified information exactly how they are allowed to treat it. And every single one of them, as soon as they were added to that chat and didn't go report it, was guilty of treason and espionage. And it is very, very, very serious. And to those saying that they think it was intentional, this is definitely conspiracy thinking. Please don't help them. It's hard to explain, but first of all, that insider language is so embarrassing and really never intended to be seen. And second of all, ask yourself, would you want the only thing standing between you and life in jail for treason to be F-47? Oh, yeah, they named an aircraft F-47. Don't you know aircrafts are named F, blah, 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 fighter jets. F-47, and he announced it, and he's so happy, and he thinks it's flattering to him, and maybe it was supposed to be, but I'm going to call it F-47. You know, the 47th president, right? For those who are not Americans, who maybe don't understand that. All right, so yeah, I think this is going to be a big deal. And I also think if nothing happens, like, America will never be the same again. And this will have a lot of repercussions. But this was the kind of thing we meant when we said that Kegsbreath didn't have what it takes to be the Secretary of State. Sorry, Secretary of Defense, right? Like, I wasn't saying I hate him because he's the absolute worst kind of vet bro that would absolutely help you cover up war crimes and has probably held somebody down for a gang rape. But that would be partisan. I didn't say it because of that. I said it because he's woefully unqualified for a job of this magnitude. And it was only a matter of time till something like this happened. I really hope this becomes a significant event that gets Americans stirred up, because if it doesn't, I think the next one is going to cause a lot more lives. I remind you that we only got into World War II after over 3,000 service members had been killed and billions of dollars of damage done to military equipment, and American is really embarrassed in front of the world. Republican dog is probably texting secret war plans right now, but telling us how he feels about this rundown. Elon Musk's stock is plummeting, which is lovely. I think soon we are probably going to start seeing Teslas either not being taken in trade-in or just straight up being vandalized in the streets. And I'm not saying I'm hoping for this. I'm just saying this is how societies police the public parade of luxury goods that they don't agree with. And all kinds of stuff is about to start happening here, y'all. But you know what? I just think it was so bold of Elon Musk to think he could piss off the entire United States government at the same time. And like, I think maybe nobody told him that the IRS took down Al Capone, but like, my cult leader taught me that. I think Elon is such a good example, first of all, of like a cult leader in end stage right now. Like, when I see him, I'm like, this cannot possibly go on for very long. And I maintain what I predicted from the beginning, that there's no way that F-47 and Elon Musk will still be, talking to each other by Christmas. But I think this blow up is probably going to happen a lot faster than this. I think Elon Musk is such a good example of like charisma is neither good nor bad. And no, I don't care if you think he's charming or not. Charisma is simply when a person has some qualities in amounts that other people don't have or don't have in those amounts. And so because of their charisma, often we decide to give them charismatic authority over us. We decide to give them authority over us. I think that for a lot of charismatic people and cult leaders, there's a time in their life in which they're choosing to use their charisma for good or for bad. Although obviously that's very binary, right? But like, I think there was a time in Elon Musk's life when he was deciding if he was going to use his qualities that he has in greater amounts than other people. He's the world's richest man, so I will not debate that he does have some, even if they're bad ones. And he was going to maybe try to use them for good. And then at some point, I just think he went full supervillain. And cult leaders often do this, and I just don't think it's going to go that well for him. So, just need to hold in place. I do feel a little bit like I made a video this week about how I feel a little bit like we are on this speeding train ride right now. And like we had an opportunity to not get on it, but now we're on it. And we're all kind of waiting because there's going to come a crash at some point. And there's only so much we can do until the crash comes. And then we have to pick ourselves up, assess the damage, figure out who survived, and then, pick up our weapons and get back to work. And I've been telling people about JRTC this week, Joint Readiness Training Center, which is 42 square miles in the Louisiana bog that was taken from Native peoples, of course, and given to the military during World War II by President Eisenhower so that they could train before going to war. And this is still where units go every year to do their war games, especially before they're going to war, but often even if they're not. And like, nobody tells you about this. Zero People's recruiters tell them that, like, at some point you're just going to go to one of the worst places in America and live there for 6 weeks playing soldier in the woods in all kinds of not great circumstances. And like, but you don't get a choice. You're there. And you are just sort of there. It sucks. You complain about it a little bit, and then you pick up your weapon and you go to work and you do what you have to do. And this is kind of what's going on in America right now. I think there's this American privilege of thinking that, like, especially white American privilege, that we get the right to live in like a nice country that functions, where people are safe and our children come home. And like, that's not so. I want to go back for a little bit to like, tools are not good or bad, right? Charisma is not a good or bad thing. Gossip, another topic we've had on this week, is not a good or bad thing, right? I said cults hate gossip. And then people tried to devolve the conversation into an argument about whether gossip is good or bad. Gossip is neither good nor bad. People can use gossip for helping each other. In fact, historically, gossip networks have saved women's lives because we pull each other aside and tell each other where the bad guys are and who they are. Gossip can also be malicious and damaging. But you know what? Good leaders in a valid organization should know how to deal with individual events of gossip that are damaging and malicious, and with those individual people without authoritarian control. There's no gossiping, right? When, of course, the cult leaders are always gossiping too. Human beings are always gossiping. I think it's one of the most enjoyable things we do. Gossiping simply is the ability to talk about humans behind each other's backs, something that humans have that almost no other, or maybe no other, creatures have, and that gives us an edge, right? So, and all of this coming to because there was apparently quite a popular video calling Knitting Cult Lady a psyop. So, first of all, psyop means psychological operation. A person can do psychological operations, but a person cannot be a psychological operation, because an operation is not a human and a human is not an operation. So this is, on the one hand, my example of like, when someone calls you a cult leader, you don't have to respond. Like, people are like, oh, if someone called you a cult or compared you to a cult, you would be upset. No, because I'm not a cult leader. I know that I'm not out here coercing and manipulating and exploiting people's labor, nor am I the leader of any groups. So I don't actually have to respond to that. But what I did want to bring up was, anyone talking about government psyops, psychological operations, is lying to you, is deceiving you, or is merely talking out of their booty, right? Like, nobody that knows anything about high-level government psyops is talking to you about them. In fact, if whoever this person was had accidentally stumbled onto the fact that I was here doing government psychological operations, she would already be disappeared. Merely the fact that I'm sure she's still around means that was just silly billiness. Okay, same thing if you hear people talking about drones. If you hear people talking about MK Ultra, like, nobody knows about drones is talking about drones. Nobody that knows about psyops is talking about psyops. And speaking about the discredited author of the Byte model, who said that trans identity is a government level psyop, and lost my respect forever and ever, amen. Someone brought up, well, then what do we do about the bite model? And here's the thing. If it's valid, it stands up to scrutiny. You know who said that? That man, even though he did not stand up to scrutiny. If his model is valid, if he validly observed scientific information and built a model that works, which is supposedly what he got his PhD off, then it works. I, however, when explaining this in a video, was like, I've never used it. I don't even know that I can really tell you much about it because I've always found Dr. Alexandra Stein, Dr. Janja Lalich, and Dr. Margaret Singer's work to be more helpful. And then I was like, oh, no kidding, because the oppressed always understand the oppressors the best. And women, as Ted Patrick, a black cult fighter, cult snatcher, once said, he's never seen a cult where women weren't a servant class. So naturally, I think women understand power dynamics and cult structures and everything about cults more, which also gives me more credit, I think, to say that cult babies, those of us who grew up in cults, understand them even better than do either women or male cult joiners, because children are certainly the most oppressed class in cults. Something to think about. All right. So one more thing I think is funny with when like any of these accusations, it's like even when people say to me, "Oh, if someone called you a cult leader, you'd be upset." First of all, that happens to me all the time because that's what people do. Which if you talk about cults, as soon as you say something they don't like, they go, "Well, you're a cult leader." Right? And like again, doesn't need to be answered. But one of the things I think is so funny is that cult members and sometimes non deconstructed ex cult members often have never seen non deceptive sales. Same for MLMs, or they've just been so inundated with deceptive sales that they often truly don't understand consensual sales. And so they think if you're popular and if you have something to sell, you're now being deceptive, even though I'm sure they go out to popular businesses that sell things all the time and spend their money, right? But this influence, right? So I think there's a couple things going on, right? Somebody said it on one of my lives, said this woman is wondering why she can't get her grift to come off as authentic. Meanwhile, because my thing's not a grift, this is who I am. I'm this random person who sits in her house and knits and talks to the internet and has had a lot of insane and intense life experiences that all seem to come together for a reason right now, and who wrote a 4.9 rated book on Audible that was recently recommended on Goodreads next to Michelle Obama's book for Women's History Month for the third time. And I created this book because it was the book that I needed when I was going through my deconstruction, and I offer it to other people as a tool that I truly believe will help them, right? Yes, I use influence tactics, right? I know that knitting keeps you here longer. I watched my doctor watch me knit for 5 minutes just in silence. I also know that the knitting gives me something to do, which allows me to appear more confident. It also pretty much makes you think I'm brilliant because I'm here discussing something you're probably not an expert in at an expert level while also knitting. I even know that one of the most common stereotypes about knitting is that you're counting all of the time. And that's not really true unless you're a beginner or you're setting up a project, which I just do off camera. But people think that I am sitting here carrying on a count in my head and having expert level conversations. Wow. Yeah, and I'm doing that because I want to keep you here because I think this information will help you. And I think if I convince you to buy a book, that it will help you too, or even some of the other books that I have to share. Anyways, it is interesting, right? So I just think that like there's a thing about consensual sales that sometimes culty people and gurus don't understand, which is this other like warning sign about gurus, right? Because then someone in the conversation was like, well, aren't accusations and questions like important? I'm like, of course, you should question everything. And you can ask me any question you want. I can tell you exactly where I got every part of my expertise, just like any good expert can. This is one of the difference between experts and gurus, right? Experts can tell you exactly where they got this, they learned this, and they know that nobody develops even thoughts in a vacuum. Gurus try to pretend like they have it all, the information, because they're special. So, of course, you're allowed to question me. She wasn't questioning me. She was saying psychobabble. But you can question me about any of my influence tactics. I am happy to talk about them. These pineapple earrings, big sellers. This rainbow coat, everybody loves it. And this t shirt that I'm wearing, fairly popular. All of these things make people happy and keep them here. All of these things are influence tactics. They're not deceptive. Those do not have to be the same thing. I mean, these are things you can look for in uh people. People that you like to watch, content creators. In fact, I'm always more suspicious when I don't see what they have to sell. Just saying. All right. So we talked about in the discussion with Hey White Women this week, with White Woman Whisperer this week on my podcast, Hey White Women, about the term black and white thinking. And you'll get to hear this episode next week when we post it, but this was just a very interesting thing that came up. Maybe it is this week, I'm not sure. I, of course, use the term black and white thinking a lot in what I talk about. And she just said, White Woman Whisperer said, as a black and white person, mixed race person, like, I don't like that. I have all kinds of feelings about the term black and white thinking, especially when you say things are not black and white. And she says, and it's so unnecessary when binary thinking is right there. Red and blue thinking is right there. Shades of purple works just as well as shades of gray. And there are no red and blue people. So there is no, more complicated stuff to go into it. And the history of black and white in our language, of course, is tied to white supremacy as, oh, everything is in this country. And it's so interesting because sitting right there, I was like, oh, yeah, I totally see that. And the hardest thing I have to do is change a few words in my book and call this the binary thinking coat. One of my nitpicks for this week. And no, it's not nitpicking language. This is some of what us thinkers and word workers do. Sit around and think about what this stuff means and how it might influence our culture. And I think it's a pretty easy thing to do, to just use binary thinking. So I'm going to be trying to do that for sure. And this goes along with, I've had a lot of Black people on my channels as I'm talking about, this is we the people. We're going to have to resist. We're going to have to fight. Just saying, please make it very clear that this is white people's fight. Right. And this is something White Women Whisperers talked about as well, especially Black women. 92% of Black women voted for Kamala. Like, they've done their job for this country over and over and over again. And right now they need to rest and relax and be protected. And white women need to come out in mass and really make change. Mr. Knitting Cult Lady and I were just talking today as I was driving him to his bachelor's college classes and just saying, if white women just got mad at the men in their lives for not fighting harder for everybody's rights, I mean, everything would change. As Amanda K. Gross says in this book, White Women Get Ready, that I am reading right now, that you can get copies of attached here, she says, as more than one Black woman in my life has said to me, if white women would get their act together, oppression wouldn't stand a chance. And I really, truly believe that. We'll get to more about surviving and resisting in a little bit. But, oh, no, we're going to get to it right now. This brings up, like, people being like, what do we do right now? And again, like, I think it's going to become clear at some point what we do. Part of, I think, is a lot of people don't know what to do, right? We don't have a history of protesting necessarily and holding our government's feet to the fire in the way that they do in other countries with just longer histories. I was listening to this book, Normal Women by Philippa Gregory, and just like, man, these English peasant women knew how to revolt and knew how to get their way. And I'm just not sure that we do, because we haven't had a situation like this before. But I do know that when you are in a cult that you cannot leave, what you do is you survive and you resist. And part of surviving is finding joy and community no matter how dire your situation. Part of surviving is understanding that this is a marathon. This is going to go on for 4 years minimum, and then more work to recover from it, we hope. Like, we cannot be burning out at the end of week 10, right? We have to take care of ourselves. We have to find a way to tune out. So I was listening to Philippa Gregory tell me about normal English women for 40 hours while making clothes this weekend. And, like, Jewish children were putting on plays for each other in camps and in the ghettos. Children growing up in the pedophile cult, just as slave labor and horribly abused in the children of God, me and my siblings and others. We were still finding joy in small ways. You have to if you are going to survive. So, make sure you're finding joy and then resist, right? There are all these ways to do political resistance, and community organizers and smarter people than me are talking about that. Although I am going to the march in DC on April 5th with the whole Knitting Cult family. If you want to join up with us, you can send an email to admin@uncultureyourself.com. I'll be putting out some information. But I want to give you two things of like personal resistance, which is color, wear color, use color. Color is an important act of resistance. And then make art, right? Make art. It's incredibly important to make art during bad times. And then just like cause good trouble, right? The fact that like Americans are just out like being jackasses and doing whatever we want all the time is going to make it harder for them to exert means of control in the first place, right? So all of this talk of like, we can't protest, we can't go, oh, be careful, they're gonna like, no, you cannot comply in advance, right? So please, please, please make lots of trouble. And now I'm going to tell you a story about Knitting Cult Baby. Okay. She was 11 months old, nursing her on the couch, right? She's just like kicking the end table. And so at some point I put my hand there, right? And stop her. Giving her a limit, right? Looking me straight in the eye. And just puts her foot right there. And I was just sitting there going, oh my gosh, my 11-month-old baby is playing not touching, can't get mad. And this tells me it's an instinct. And it's especially an American personality as well, that like when you tell a human being not to do something, they're like, no, F you. Like, even if we wanted to do it anyway, and then you tell us to do it, we're going to not do it just to spite you. So like, remember that. Remember that that is an instinct that we have. And that we don't just have to go along with tyranny. Okay. I actually had a good conversation with a AA stepper this week from the cult of AA, and someone left a kind of casual, like, why are you attacking AA? What's the harm? And I yelled. I literally yelled for 3 minutes talking about what all the harms were, all of the damage that is caused, 13th stepping, which is sexual abuse, labor trafficking and labor exploitation, working new members in people's businesses, even some international human trafficking here in DC in the Midtown chapter, and also probably a lot of people pushed toward or into suicide because being presented with an abstinence only model that runs on shame and coercion and manipulation. And so I yelled a lot. I said Taylor damned many times. And this person listened. And she said, oh, wow, I didn't know the harms. Although I will advise all of you, like anytime you want to know the harms of some group, just Google X group and cult and then listen to the survivor stories and believe them. It's not hard to find people who will tell you their bad AA stories. In fact, I'm sure this comment section will have some of them because I hold space for that. And so, like, no valid organization should be telling you not to speak to ex-members or people that have negative stories, right? Negative stories are just as good as positive stories. And then one of the things I said when I was yelling, I said, I've never seen a stepper give a damn about anyone who was hurt. It's a very I got mine attitude. And she said, I'm listening. I want to know more. And so I told her more very nicely. And then she showed up to my live and she asked more questions. And I hate the fact, and she's asking questions about how she can fix it from the inside. I hate the fact that I know that she's not going to be there much longer. I don't hate that. I'm actually happy that I know that she won't be in a cult much longer. But I know it's the crack and the brainwashing, and the first thing she's going to want to do is fix it. And eventually, she's probably going to find out that it's impossible to fix toxic organizations from the inside without tearing them down and starting over. But it was a good conversation, and I hope we can have more conversations like that. One of the main messages I have is like many people, almost every large cult has a wide base of people who only experienced the good offerings of that cult. And absolutely nobody is making you show up and shut down people sharing their negative stories or talking about the bad of this group. If a group had saved my life, I would be damn dedicated to making sure that we kept predators out of it and we talked about the bad stuff and we kept it updated to modern science so that it could keep being relevant and saving other people's lives. And one of the things I said to her, which I hope really, really got through to her, is like, I don't believe that AA cares about addicts. I don't believe it ever did, and I don't believe it does now. Because if it cared about addicts, it would care about people getting sober and or bettering their lives. Doesn't always require getting completely sober to a livable point, no matter how they did it. But they don't. And that's part of what makes it a cult. And that's part of what makes their mission a lie. Okay, moving on. I'm also reading, oh yeah, I want to talk about appearance control. So there was a very photo of Carolyn Levitt that showed her before surgeries and now. And she's only 27. She definitely looks about 40. But the thing is, now she has the Maga Mask. It's like the same face that all of these women are going for. And I talk about this not to critique women's appearances. You can do whatever you want with your appearance. I talk about this to talk about appearance control in cults. And often in cult organizations, we see people starting to look homogenous. It's not uniform always. Sometimes it is, but it is a uniformity of appearance. And you police each other and everybody starts to look the same. Mormon women are generally a very good example of this, right? And so, like, we're starting to see this. We're starting to see this in MAGA with surgeries on women, with makeup on men, with Mike Johnson wearing a bunch of orange bronzer on his face to try to, like, emulate the cult leader, right? So this brings me to talking about wearing wacky outfits. Wear wacky outfits. That's how you know you're not caving to appearance control. Just wear stuff for fun that you have no reason to wear. And I'll tell you a story. So first of all, this jacket here, which is beloved of people, was probably one of my first like really wacky clothing piece. And I was at a thrift store and I saw this and I said, do I love this or do I hate this? I said, I think I love it. And it was the beginning of me really just deciding my own style and deciding to wear whatever I wanted to wear. But here's another thing that I've noticed, right? So this started when I was a runner. You can read about it in Uncultured. Won some marathons and stuff. But every once in a while, you get with your girlfriends and you put on like really fun outfits for like a 4th of July run or whatever, right? And I noticed that when you're wearing a fun outfit, like people smile at you, especially if you're just like running a regular marathon, but you're dressed with butterfly wings, you know? And then when I was pregnant, people smile at you when you're doing the thing and making babies. Some black women say this is the only time they get regularly acknowledged as human and smiled at is when they're pregnant. But the thing is, like, it's nice. It's nice when people smile at you and wave at you all the time. And now, like, that happens to me every day, right? Like, people are like, hey, I love your outfit. I love this. I love that. And smiling. And here's the thing. It's not just making me happy. It's creating joy, right? Now, I regularly, when somebody yells out, hey, I love your outfit, I will regularly reply, thanks, Color is an important form of resistance, right? And it hopefully inspires them, right? But just like creating joy, right? What I wore made them smile, and then they smiled at me, and then that made me smile. And creating joy in times of tyranny is resistance. So, when you see me at the DC March, I will be wearing the finished version of the Lorelei, this amazing coat that I am making, called the Lorelei because I use this mesh metal chainmail, which I use for the mermaid earrings, and I tie that into cults because they let us watch Little Mermaid in the Children of God because they said it was a Christ story where he sacrifices himself for his daughter. But what I got out of it was it's a story that she gets away from her controlling authoritarian father in the end. So anyway, the Lorelei comes from Norse mythology. They are either a rock in the Rhine River where the sirens sat and lured the sailors to their death, or they are the sirens, plural, right? The Lorelei. And so anyways, this is my super fabulous. This is the kind of designer thing that if I sold it, it would be $3,000. Except I would never sell it because this is an actual panel from Knitting Cult Baby's sparkle dress when she was about 5 years old. So I will be wearing that, creating joy and resisting. I will be there with the whole Knitting Cult family, Knitting Cult Baby, Mr. Knitting Cult Lady, and I. And I will be putting out more information about that in next week's sit rep, but also you can email admin@uncultureyourself.com if you plan to be at the march, because Mr. Knitting Cult Lady and I are creating like our own little group of people to just stand up and resist. All right, there's some stuff going on around the world. In Japan, it was the 30th anniversary of the Tokyo subway sarin attacks, which was done by a cult called Aum Shinrikyo. Did a sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway, which killed 13 people and injured over 6,000. So the survivors, victims, and families are continuing to seek justice and closure. There's still approximately 1,600 members operating in this cult undercover and, evading court orders to compensate their victims, etc. Japan, which likes to do something about their cults, also banned the Unification Church, which is the Moonies. A disgruntled, not disgruntled, an ex cult member who I believe had been raised in the Moonies, or blamed his mother's involvement on the Moonies. And so yes, it was someone who had a grudge against the church. Now probably a survivor who'd been very, very hurt by a cult. Assassinated the prime minister. Governments are always in cahoots with cults. Anyway, there's been a response. Japan has ordered the dissolution of the Moonies. This doesn't mean it's the cult is actually going to be kicked out of the country. You never really know. Like the Children of God was once also kicked out of Japan, and that didn't mean they stopped being Children of God in Japan. They just hid better, but it's still a positive sign when a government does something against cults. Why has our government never done anything about cults? Oh, let me tell you about the cult wars. Okay. In the 80s, after Manson, after Jonestown, Americans were starting to get mad. Americans were starting to demand laws against coercive control. Then guess what happened? Religious leaders decided that if there were laws that banned cults or clamped down on cults, they would also affect the control of religious leaders in America. So they partnered with academics, pretty questionable ones in my opinion, to say that using the word cult was a slur, that it was bad, that it was just people trying to persecute new religious movements. And oh, by the way, the academic Taylor damned Gordon Melton, who came up with the term new religious movement, took $100,000 from the Children of God to say that they weren't a cult, which allowed 4 different countries who raided and took the children away to be forced to give the children back to the pedo cult. All because your religious leaders didn't want to lose control over you. That's why we have no rules. In Japan, for instance, after their big waltz with cults 30 years ago, they made some laws. They made it illegal to force a child to be in a religion or to attend church, and they call it a soul crime, and I think it's beautiful and also should probably be the name of a band. Back to my notes. Okay. Here's a teenage murder linked to delusional beliefs. In April 2023, a 15-year-old Australian boy murdered by his mother as part of a delusional plan, Operation Continuity, aimed at overthrowing the government to impose Christian values. The plan, devised with a friend, involved recruiting classmates and committing acts of violence. The case highlights concerns about how extremist beliefs can lead to tragic outcomes. And these incidents also underscore the ongoing challenges posed by cults and the importance of vigilance and education, but I also think it underscores religious, suicidal, and murderous ideology. And I think this ties into rapture culture, which we talked about last week, but we're really seeing a lot of this in America, right? When a people constantly tells themselves over and over again, the end is coming, this world is not our home, we're going to a better place. One, they don't care about saving the world, right? Part of why the right doesn't care about climate change is because Christian nationalists want the world to burn. Cult members want the apocalypse to come. They are not afraid, they are prepared. I believe it's kind of essentially religious suicidal ideology. I think we're seeing a little bit of this on the left, though, like people yearning. I call it apocalypticizing, fantasizing about the apocalypse, yearning for some big disaster so that they can just go crazy or so that there will be some obvious sign. But I do not believe that a Messiah is coming to save us, America. We are going to have to figure out how to save ourselves on this earth, not after some cult Jesus space travel. I remind you, cults are always promising space travel. The Utah governor signed HB 33 into law, which provides protections for influencer children. This is very important. One of the drivers behind the bill was Sherry Frank, daughter of famous mommy blogger Ruby Frank, who is now in prison for child abuse. Sherry is quoted as saying, "I don't come today as the daughter of a felon, nor a victim of an abnormally abusive mother. I come today as a victim of family vlogging." She said, "My goal is not to present any idea of a solution to this problem, but to shed light on the ethical and monetary issues that come from being a child influencer. There's no such thing as a moral or ethical family vlogger." I believe in this very intensely. I do not think there's a moral or ethical way to monetize your children. In an exclusive statement to Teen Vogue, Sherry Frank said, "I have felt such a calling to help and protect kids who went through the same experiences that I did. I'm proud of the Utah legislation for taking this step in protecting child influencers. However, my work is only beginning, and I will continue to be outspoken on putting an end to family vlogging." I think they also put like if their children are making more than $150,000 a year or something, the parents have to be putting money in a trust that the parents can't trust for the children. But this is something very near and dear to my heart. I, of course, grew up in the Children of God. This is a picture of me being trafficked in entertainment in Japan, no less, as a 2-year-old. And I did actually a talk on shiny, happy child exploitation last week. I posted the video on YouTube. You can find it. You can't see my cool slides, unfortunately, but you can see me giving the talk. And just like cults are always about labor. This is a very important thing to understand. They are always about labor. And this was not hidden, right? This was on YouTube for the whole world, as was the Children of God, who performed twice in the White House, right? I grew up singing all over the streets of Mexico and Brazil, not only being hidden away in some commune being abused, right? This shiny religious trafficking, we do not talk about it enough, and it is a very, very important thing to discuss. This week on my podcast on cults and the culting of America, we released an episode called Satanic Panic Debunked, and we talked to Lydia Knight, who many of you have asked me to interview. She is so marvelous. In this episode of Cults and the Culting of America, hosts Scott Lloyd and Daniela Mestenek-Young engage in a profound conversation with Lydia Knight, who shares her harrowing experiences growing up in a cult. Lydia discusses the complexities of her upbringing, including themes of racism, the satanic panic, and the psychological impact of fear and control within cult dynamics. So Lydia basically was raised by a Mormon grandmother and who inculcated into her the satanic panic, told her that she and her brother as children, their father, who was Chinese, by the way, who was, in this horrible thing, was a rapist and a murderer and had broken her back and had flayed her and done all of these things, right? And as I've talked about before, the satanic panic has proven to be not true, to be the witch hunts just rebranded and rebranding again and coming back now. Do not come at me. I will not debate this. There were 1,200 cases of this investigated, and not one physical piece of evidence was found on any of these children that any of this stuff had been done. This child was absolutely abused by her Mormon grandmother and mother who taught her this stuff. Who were actually, of course, the ones abusing her. Story has a beautiful ending. She's eventually reunited with her father. Who never stopped looking for her for like 25 years for his kids who were just taken away. And they are writing a book together. Anyways, check out that episode on our website. And on Hey White Women, we posted an episode about defensiveness and white identity. In this conversation, Rebecca and Daniela explore the complexities of race, identity, and the dynamics of power within societal structures. We talk about the defensiveness often exhibited by white women in conversations about race, the impact of language, and the role of white women in perpetuating systems of oppression. Man, I'm trying to get some details. That like white women are afraid of black spaces and are acting like they're going to be thrown out. And really, you just can talk about white women can talk about our own trauma. We can learn, we can educate ourselves, we can go through anti-racist deconstruction and deconstruction of the delusion of white supremacy. And then I've only found black people to welcome us into their spaces once we are no longer harmful to them. And again, I'll tell you about this amazing book that I'm reading, White Women Get Ready, How Healing Post-Traumatic Mistress Syndrome Leads to Anti-Racist Change. You can get signed copies here. This was published by Otterpine, which is a minority woman veteran-owned publisher whom I will be publishing my Culting of America with. And speaking of which, if you are interested in contributing to the fundraiser for Culting of America, which we are producing at about $100,000 cost, there is a link for that here in the notes, and we are very excited about all of that. We appreciate any help. Also, if you're buying copies of Uncultured from me directly, you are contributing to that because that is what I am raising money for right now in all of these ways. In book club, we talked this month. We had, I'm just going to talk about what's coming up. We're reading Jamelia Chisholm's The Community. This is about growing up briefly in the Nubian Nation, which is a black Muslim cult, and yet I have never read anything that better described my childhood than this, including my own book. She goes into such detail. It's such a good book to me that re-emphasizes like all cults are the same. The flavors are different, but all cults are the same. Super, super good book. We are also moving on from, we just spent 3 months on Yanya Lalich's Take Back Your Life. Now we are moving on to Terror, Love, and Brainwashing. You can also get a copy of this here in the notes or tagged here. We are going to be reading that for 3 months. She does some really good stuff on disorganized attachment and dissociation. It's just a really, really good book. But also, these book clubs are not college classes. You are not required to do the homework. You are absolutely willing to come when you can and not come when you can't come and not have done the reading and just come for the conversation, you access book clubs through my Patreon at the $10 level. That, of course, will be linked here as well. All right. Also, I have a call for women veterans. It's a free monthly call we do just to support each other and build community. If you are interested in being part of that, you can send an email to admin@uncultureyourself.com. I'm going to be in Dallas next month, and I'm going to, of course, be doing a knitting cult pop-up happy hour. This one will be extra special because Knitting Cult Mama and Knitting Cult Baby will be there. Both probably knitting. You can get details for that linked here as well. It's an Eventbrite that you can sign up for. It's free. That's just how we're going to put out the information. We're probably going to be in the Plano Richardson part of the DFW. I'm also, I think, on the 17th going to present of the musical concept, Uncultured, the Cult Baby musical. I'm going to talk it all through to my Dallas audience, but also broadcast it. So stay tuned. It will show up here at some point, probably. It was funny because I knew that this was like the next step for me with my verbal processing before actually writing the script in the summer. And then I remembered that my mama is a stenographer, and she can almost certainly just take notes. Lovely. We are going to be marching in DC April 5th. I already said that. Just want to remind you, if you don't have anyone to go with and you want to come join Knitting Cult Family, please come do that. The email again is admin@uncultureyourself.com. And as soon as Mr. Knitting Cult Lady makes the operations plan, I will have information to give out on where we're meeting up and how you can find us, etc. But, look for this. Okay. Finally, Culting of America updates. We have now crossed the $3,000 threshold. We are so appreciative. So $2,000 was the audiobook, $3,000 some production costs, let's call it. Okay, I have gotten behind schedule. I no longer think it's actually going to come out this year. My goal now is to be done with the text of the book by Memorial Day weekend, which is also my birthday and Mr. Knitting Cult Lady's graduation party. That's going to be an open party in College Park, Maryland, so I'll put out more about that. But it probably is going to push the production and the publication to next year. But one, it's because we're trying to make a really good book for you. And two, it's because it's a pretty wild time to be an expert on the bad guy. And I have been pretty busy and also pretty distracted, just like the rest of you all, I am sure. But it is coming. I'm working as fast as I can on it. And I am in the last chapters of my first big editing pass. And then, always more work than you think to get it done. And I got glasses this week for the first time since 2012. Prescription glasses. All the other cute ones you've seen me have just been readers. And it woke up a whole bunch of trauma for me. But I'm going to start with, it reminded me of what a good way to talk about privilege glasses are. Because if you've never had to pay to use your eyes, you were born with a privilege that others were not. And if you had to pay to use your eyes, but you had money, your family had money to pay for that, it was another level of privilege. And if you were born into any kind of lower resourced or traumatic childhood, you probably maybe have some glasses related trauma. So I'm going to tell you about mine. So first of all, I had LASIK in 2012, right? And I don't know if it ever got better enough that I didn't need glasses, but it was better than it was before. So, and the surgeon said I was fine, so I accepted it and rolled on. But over the last 3 years, my eyesight has been getting noticeably worse. This is why I've been collecting all these different readers. I describe my eyesight as when your camera iPhone is like smeared with grease, like to the point that I sometimes feel like I need to just like clean off my eyes. So finally, the VA agreed that I needed new glasses, gave me a pair. I get them and I put them on, and oh my god, I can see. And one of the things is it's not that my prescription is that bad, but it's that my eyes are wildly different prescriptions. And my left eye, I could tell. Like when I covered up my right eye, I could barely see things. And my right eye is doing so much of the work. Which there's an interesting thing because I'm very clumsy, right? Autistic, ADHD, bad proprioception, don't know where my body is in space, all these things. But almost all of my big accidents are on my left side. When you read in Unculture about me slicing open my hand, left hand, break my leg, left leg, ripping open my knee, which you don't hear about, left knee. Always have trouble on the left side. I bet if I looked at my car and paid attention, I run into left curbs more. And it's just something I never realized. But the biggest thing was I put my glasses on. Suddenly I could see. And I got triggered so hard because I had that same experience when I was 14 years old. And what happened was I wore glasses. I needed glasses from about the age of 5. And like even the fact that they figured out in a cult that I needed glasses where we didn't go to school and we didn't have doctors, like that tells you that my eyes were bad. So I got glasses, and then it was just a constant fight with my father about losing my glasses and breaking my glasses and all of this stuff. And I get it. We were dirt poor. Most of the glasses were donated, but you know what, Dad? It turns out that it wasn't the devil inhabiting me or God punishing me or carelessness or clumsiness, as boyfriends later would like to say. Like, it was neurodiversity. And, anyways, so I don't know all the details, but I know that when I was 11, I was told, if you break these glasses, you won't get any more. And then when I inevitably broke them, I just didn't get any more glasses till I was 14. So when I was 14, we came to California, we got Medicaid, I finally got glasses and I put them on, and I suddenly saw that I had freckles all over my face. And I just fell to the floor crying. And at the time, I just thought it was a vain teenage thing, but I really truly think now it was just because I have the language for how abusive that was, or for how, like, you just took my eyes away for 3 years because you were mad at me. How often I got in trouble for adults for being out of the spirit because I would be squinting at things and I looked mad, and attitude and appearance control, especially if I was reading the Bible or something from the prophet and I looked mad, and they could not be convinced that I wasn't being rebellious inside my brain and my spirit. And it was just a lot. And I have never been so triggered and so aware of how triggered I was at the same time. Which I think is good. It's part of healing, right? We're probably never going to stop having these triggers through our lives, but at least I knew what was happening. I was able to get good support from my therapist, from my private personal friends, and then even from the online community, which, geez, every time I figure out how to talk about a new form of trauma, people come and people share and people relate. But I go back to the privilege thing. I'm married to a pilot who obviously has 20/20 vision, and so does his baby. And they just don't get it. And they just don't get. And I was like, I'm accepting. I have to, like, oh, I'm disabled again, right? I have to pay to use my eyes now. And they're going to get worse, like it's just the progressiveness has just started. So it's like, where is it going to end? How's this going to be? I'm going to lose all my cute glasses and sunglasses. I have a thing on my driver's license that I have to have glasses to drive, right? And Mr. Macaulay looks at me, he goes, so what have you been doing for the last 13 years? I said, I have a card that lives in my wallet that never comes out saying that I have my eyes fixed. And it just makes me think about, one time in college when I was pulled over and didn't have my glasses on because I had sunglasses on because I'm super photo light sensitive, and was like, the guy just asked me, do you have contacts on? I said, yeah. And then he just accepted, and I didn't. That was a lie. And it's just, that's another interaction with police. And I guarantee you that a Black American has been killed for not having their glasses on in a car, just because I know how the world works. So there you go with privilege. Always comes back to that, doesn't it? Oh, the more we know, the more we know. And I think it can be a good way to talk to people because people will get a lot less up in arms talking about eyeglasses privilege than talking about something like white privilege, for example, which, of course, hopefully they will think about or you will bring up later in that conversation. And now for some nitpicking. I've already showed you the Lorelei, but I'm going to show it again because it's so pretty. Look how good the sleeves are coming out. I hope the sleeves would match with the back sequins. And they are. Okay, the binary thinking coat. Oh my god, I wore it yesterday to cult happy hour and it was so popular. And of course, some circular logic earrings, which I wear like that. That I actually put together like a whole bunch of swag that I'm bringing to the Dallas event, and I was just trying it all out yesterday. So I have a whole bag. Just realizing that y'all can't hear me during the knitting parts. Been making hair control hair ties. These are the things that are the most popular, turns out. So I sell them everywhere. You get 3. You can request 3 specific colors. You can let me decide, or you can just give me one favorite color and I'll make you a little bundle. They're going well. I've also bundled some of them like with books or with whatever. Got all kinds of circular logic earrings. We just keep going and going. And now look, thought-stopping cliche headbands. This is my Harvard one. Although I can't wear headbands because I immediately get crazy headaches. We got some kitty cat ears. I'm going to get some unicorn horns and I'm going to make some of those soon. Ooh, I also been thinking about the kinds of glasses holders that I'm going to make because losing my glasses is about to become my whole personality, as I recently warned my family. Which is even another form of privilege in people's stories. Like some people were like, oh, my glasses never broke because they were never off my face unless I was sleeping and they were only in one spot. So even just like being able to see enough to find your glasses. Privilege. These are the fuzzy logic earrings for the babies or for women that are just less bold and quirky than me. So cute. And this is a scarf again that I'm making for someone. This is the first one where somebody sent me a scarf that they already had, and then I'm just making the art. Look at this super beautiful. It's got these little ridges. I love. It's time consuming, but I love to do. Sending that to her soon. And finally, the love again. Okay, so first I made this one for Knitting Cult Baby. Well, I thought it was going to be for me, but it turned out to be Knitting Cult Baby size. And then I made me one, sort of matchy. This scarf I actually brought from Afghanistan. I wore it in my TED Talk when I was a baby speaker and entertainer. It's called Lost in Transition. You can look it up. Anyways, I love that they're like sort of matchy, but not. And she has agreed that we could wear them together, although that has not happened yet. That's all for me this week, folks. Please follow me everywhere you can find because social media platforms just aren't that stable. Patreon is, of course, where you can subscribe at any level. You can subscribe for free just to not lose track. And I will see you next week as we live through the culting of America.